Welcome to Flip the Cap, the insurance industry's premier podcast. I'm your host, Kathryn Smith, and today we're going to explore the ever-evolving world of cannabis and discuss specifically how our retailers can set their cannabis clients up for success. My special guest today is Erich Schutz, Jencap's National Practice Leader for Cannabis. He began his insurance career in 2009 at Beasley, underwriting middle market property and professional lines business. Quickly realizing that he was better suited for the production side of the house, he joined a regional wholesaler in New England for a couple of years. He then became a broker at NIF Group, which several years later was acquired by Jencap, and really the rest is history. Erich is a highly sought-after cannabis expert broker that appears regularly on various roundtable discussions, articles, and videos, providing his take on trending topics and sharing his expertise. Cannabis insurance is far from straightforward, so I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. So without further ado, let's pop the top and get into it.
Here we go.
Erich, I really appreciate you joining me today on Flip the Cap. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of the cannabis insurance world, which is complicated in and of itself, I want to put you on the hot seat. And our viewers want to get to know the man behind this cannabis insurance ninja.
Okay.
Or really, I've heard you just called the ninja. So where did this term cannabis insurance ninja come from?
Great question. So about 5 years ago, when I decided to go all in on cannabis professionally, I had learned that branding was incredibly important in professionally, I should say. And
music to my ears.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was always a big believer in LinkedIn, and I learned the power of the LinkedIn platform, the power of branding, your own brand and your company's brand. And I thought that when I was going into cannabis, that I just needed to build on what I already, the foundation and network that I already had, and that having a moniker like the Cannabis Insurance Ninja would catch people's eyes. But it wasn't just a title. It was also, it's true to what I do and who I am. Ninjas are fast, stealthy, cunning, powerful, all these different adjectives and things that I feel that my team does on a daily basis. And it's a very unique market. You have to bring those ninja skills every day to be successful, I feel.
Well, the fact that we're still talking about it all these years later just goes to show that it worked and is continuing to work. So if you aren't brokering cannabis business or hanging out with your family, I know you have 2 young kids, which takes up a lot of time. I can relate. What do you do for fun?
Yeah, when I was spending time with my beautiful wife and 2 kids, I love to spend time outdoors. I'm a big outdoorsman, like to fish, like to hunt, especially I like to hunt ducks, chase ducks. That's one of my passionate things. So on a Saturday, if I get a hall pass, you're going to find me in a duck blind. And any other day of the week, if it's the summer, you're going to find me out on the boat in the surf, chasing stripers and trying to wet a line.
So what about TV? If you get an hour to veg on the couch, what's the ninja watching?
I don't know, maybe something very un-ninja-y. I would say it's some guilty pleasure. I watch a lot of Bravo with my wife, a lot of Real Housewives. I'm a guy's guy, but there's nothing wrong with watching some good nighttime soaps, I guess you'd call it. So yeah, if I have an hour, I'm going to spend time with a cold beer and a glass of wine on the couch watching some Housewives, probably.
That's really funny. Okay. Well, my next question was going to be, what's one thing we'd be surprised to learn about you? That was definitely one of them for me. But what is something else that people would be surprised to learn about you?
All right. I guess once we get past guilty pleasure TV shows, we could go to little history of my family. So I was a bilingual baby. I was born in the States, but actually never spoke a word English to my father until I was 6 years old. So still speak the language a bit, but German household, bilingual family, and that's just how it stacked up. So I was very fortunate to learn multiple languages at an early age. And to be honest, as a lifelong salesperson, having language skills is critical to communicating, and something I honestly believe is maybe very successful today.
I know you're very involved in the National Fragile X Foundation. So educate our listeners on what the mission of the foundation is and why it's something that you're so intimately passionate about.
Sure. So Fragile X is a genetic disorder mutation, which my son has. It affects his ability to develop. It presents very similar to autism, but not the same at all. So because of my son's journey, he's 4 years old, relatively nonverbal, almost certainly won't be independent, is giving me this this guiding light. He's my cause. He's a wonderful, sweet little kid, but he has a ton of challenges, as do many other adults and children in his position across the country and the world. So by being dealt this difficult hand and just being a very active parent and loving my kid, I've learned so much about this genetic mutation and this wonderful foundation that is a nonprofit that does fundraising, advocacy, education. And through them, we've gotten some wonderful treatments. And my son is actually in an FDA-approved CBD trial for cannabidiol that has changed our family's life. So it's a very important cause to me, and actually bridges a lot of things that are important to me in the cannabis space, professionally and personally.
For people listening that want to support the incredible mission and the work that National Fragile X Foundation is doing, where can one go to support the organization?
Yeah, the best place would be just Google Fragile X, and you'll get the first hit will be the National Fragile X Association. And honestly, if you Google Wally and Fragile X, honestly, my son and his story and our blog and our fundraising pages will all be some of the first things that come up. So it's a great resource, and I really encourage people to take a look.
That's awesome. We'll definitely link it in the podcast as well.
I'd appreciate that.
Okay, guys, we'll be right back. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, it's time for Erich to flip the cap. We make all of our guests play this wonderful game, and the score to beat is 2 tosses. So let's see if he can shake up the top of the leaderboard today. We'll be right back.
Flip the Cap is brought to you by Jencap. Jencap is one of the largest wholesale intermediaries in the United States, with expertise in wholesale brokerage, binding authority, and program management. Jencap has specialized divisions and affiliate companies that provide niche expertise, unparalleled market access, and nationwide influence. Encompassing expertise from every corner of the industry, Jencap is the ultimate award-winning insurance family. Put Jencap to work for you.
We're back, and you're watching Flip the Cap, the industry's premier insurance podcast where insurance insights flow and trending topics are always on tap. I'm joined by special guest, Erich Schutz, who's the National Practice Leader for Jencap's Cannabis Division. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the unique challenges that cannabis operators are facing, some of the most misunderstood coverage areas as it relates to cannabis insurance, and so much more. But first, we're going to flip the cap. So as you can see on the leaderboard, Deb Diaguardi and Roman Netkelski are tied for 2 tosses. For those of you that haven't ever tuned in, I unfortunately torture my guests into playing this game. Let me tell you the rules of the road here, Erich. It's real simple. I feel sure you've done this at some point. I know.
Saw it on TV once.
Yeah, saw it on TV once. So the only real rule to this is don't go elbowing past the table, okay? So as long as you keep your elbow off the table, let's see how you do.
Elbows only. All right. Here we go.
Oh, so close. You got robbed. High five. 3.
Coming for you, Beasley.
You and Ben are tied. We'll be right back. So now that we've done the getting to know you questions and had a little bit of fun with Flip the Cap, let's dig into some of the real specifics of the cannabis industry. The global cannabis market size was valued at $43.5 billion in 2022, and it's projected to grow from $57 billion this year to over $444 billion, which would be a compound annual growth rate of over 34%. So in your perspective, what do you attribute this rapid growth rate to?
Yeah, I mean, many factors, Kathryn. Today I'm sitting in Georgia. Great example. Pharmacies in Georgia just are allowed to sell medical cannabis in the last month. That is a micro example of rapid expansion. We have a system of hundreds of pharmacies that are now ad hoc dispensaries. That's a micro level in a state that I'm in right now. Macro level, you have states like countries like Germany opening up to cannabis. You have other countries opening up, especially in the EU, to hemp, low CBD cannabis, similar to what is available under the U.S. Farm Bill. So we have an expansion of the marijuana, high THC, and the low THC CBD hemp, as it's called, coming across the world. At some point, China will get past the fact that they have social issues with cannabis and things. So there is going to be a massive expansion. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, cannabis is an agricultural product. It's akin to a row crop, especially when you're talking about hemp and CBD. So there's just going to be continued expansion as there's more loosening in regulations, education, and distribution of the products.
So the cannabis market, with all of this growth, has gradually matured, which I would imagine has made it more readily available to secure insurance coverage through standard markets. But that doesn't mean to say that it's easy by any stretch of the imagination, especially because it's still federally illegal. So what are some of the unique challenges that cannabis risks specifically, or cannabis operations, have in today's landscape?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest ones is still just availability of coverage. I've said this over the years that these are A+ risks that are getting D+ terms and coverages. So there's this disparity between the standard market and mainstream businesses like banks and pharmacies and shoe stores that get your standard admitted market coverage that's very robust, inexpensive, not fraught with exclusions. And you go over to my world where that's not the case. And it's much more difficult to source higher limits. The price is often prohibitively expensive. So it's still the same old issue we've had over the years. But as the market has matured, the buyer has become much more savvy. And that's what's interesting is, the buyer before either didn't want any insurance because they're coming from a place where maybe they were selling cannabis illegally before. So insurance didn't really mean that much to them because of their risk posture. Or they've just gotten to a place where, now we are so focused on expenses, and this is not just, it's not going to just sell itself anymore, as people would say. So, you really actually have to have a smart business model and be efficient. And oftentimes, insurance, for an average traditional business, insurance is one of the top spends, 2 or 3 after payroll. So when you're looking at expenses in a world where we are now in cannabis in 2023, where there's a lot more competition in the maturing states where, they are focused on every dollar. And you're going to hear me talk about more and more about efficient insurance. It used to be about underinsurance because you couldn't get the insurance. Now it's there. And then it was a glut of overinsurance. And we look at policies that had too high of limits or crop limits that they would never even, obtain in a loss. And now, in my opinion, it's more about marrying that all together and bringing efficiency to clients, bringing concurrency to dates, stacking limits together, things of that nature to bring true efficiency to insurance programs.
So I think it's safe for me to say that federal legalization is inevitable. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And there are lots of different implications for our retail partners and things that they need to have on their radar to make sure that they're prepared to properly service their clients' needs. And while we're sort of forecasting into future here, walk us through some of the most likely paths of the future of cannabis insurance and some of the things that our retail partners need to be ready for if and when those various different outcomes happen.
Great question. And I think one of the key parts of the question that maybe we miss is not when, but how. I think that's the crux of the question is how will the regulation come? When could be 1 year, 3 years, but how? Is it federal legalization? Is it Schedule 3 controlled substance, which is being proposed right now, which would make cannabis akin to like Tylenol with codeine? So, not an over-the-counter medication by any means. So it really depends on what the Fed does and what states do. So there's opportunity for it to be, completely decriminalized. Take Massachusetts, for example. Massachusetts is completely decriminalized, which in my opinion would be beneficial for the United States. So in that regulatory regime, the state is able to make its own regulations, decide the framework, medical, recreational, whether doctors prescribe it, whether you can buy it at a liquor store, whether you can buy it at a very protected dispensary. That's the Massachusetts model, and that's really the model of very different states. I think that's likely where the Fed could go, but also too, you have to think about medications and anything that's FDA approved, controlled substances like Tylenol with codeine that is transported over state lines has to be FDA approved. That's part of the definition. So that then means that if you want to be in the medical cannabis space, depending on what the Fed says, you have to be FDA approved. to have every gummy, lozenge, bud, et cetera, FDA approved is nearly impossible. FDA approves single, medications, a compound that is this, not a bud that could contain this and that. So the medical side is where I think it's going to be very interesting, because when you're talking about smoking, ingesting things and putting into your lungs, that's kind of counter to better health. So it's going to be really interesting to see what products are going to be allowed. And if the federal government decides to control medical cannabis, which I believe they will have to, for better or worse, it's going to put most medical dispensaries, in my opinion, out of business. As I mentioned before, Georgia is unique where they have this mechanism where they're selling medical cannabis through pharmacies. I think that's where this is all going to go. And I think Georgia, in a way, is telling everybody out there, heads up, this is probably the future. Medical cannabis is going to be distributed through medical channels. If it's medicine, that's where it should be. Recreational cannabis, that's a whole different thing. And I think that's probably going to take more the path of alcohol. Every state will regulate it differently. There'll be some basic federal framework, and everything will trickle down.
Given all the various complexities and gray areas and unknowns of the cannabis industry, with all of the risks that you look at it on a daily basis, what are some of the most commonly misunderstood or misrepresented coverage areas with cannabis insurance?
It's kind of like the question that there's known knowns and there's unknown unknowns. Well, we know some of the unknowns. So
you guys are going to have to play that one back.
So honestly, I think it's crop coverage. Especially in the early days and still today, people gravitate towards, I'm a grower, I need to protect my crops. Makes perfect natural sense. But then when you kind of dig into it and you look at the coverages and such, you actually realize that, like, you talk to a grower and say, hey, what do you want crop protection for? Pests, vermin, environmental issues, my HVAC goes out, equipment break, all these things. I'm like, well, you're about to buy a policy that's not going to cover any of that. So I find that when we talk to agents all the time, we talk about overinsurance, underinsurance, efficient insurance, we walk in all these situations where people are covering, having crop coverage that would cover 4 times what their entire value of their crop is, because they just didn't understand it. And then when you actually talk to the insured and the loss came in, they would say, well, I had my HVAC system broke down and I'm covered, right? And you're like, no, equipment breakdown's excluded. They're like, why the heck am I paying for this? And what we've come to realize is exactly why the heck are you paying for it? Because it's a limited peril coverage, generally 9 perils. So that's one area where I see, a lot of folks either overinsuring or not understanding it. And I think there's some other areas too, where folks aren't taking the coverage where they should. To take an opposite, like cyber is an area where it drives me crazy. We've got all these retailers taking ATM transactions, tons of personal info, credit card, driver's license, scanning them, and they don't have cyber. So there's this dichotomy of people over-insuring for crop, and then you have something that's critically important like cyber or employment practice liability that they're, I don't want to say ignoring, but not taking up. I think a lot of that's education, because a layperson who's growing crops thinks, I have to protect my crops. That's what's going to hurt my business. On the other side, the cyber and the employment practices, that's what's really going to affect your business when somebody sues you for a workplace incident or a data breach.
So there's been a lot of headline news in Michigan and Missouri with these product recall scenarios that they've highlighted all over the news. So in a lot of GL policies, they include a small expense reimbursement for recalls, but it's not true recall coverage. So how can our retail partners ensure that their cannabis clients have the coverage that they need in that coverage area?
The way I would give an analogy to is the old days of when you get employment practices on a BOP, and agents would say, I'm all good. They've got it on their BOP. And then you actually look at it and it's terrible, watered down coverage. It's, first party only, and it's a $50K sublimit. That's what a lot of this is in the cannabis space. And I'm not saying it's bad coverage. I'm just saying it gives an illusion of coverage that maybe not be there. So, the typical product is expense reimbursement. So very limited reasons for a recall. You have to take things off the shelf. You have to ship them somewhere to get destroyed. That has a cost. So you get paid for that. Now there's no pay for the income you would have had to replace that stock, all these other things that can be attributed to a first or third party recall event, none of that is covered. It's just a simple expense reimbursement. Now, these events that you're talking about, Missouri and Michigan, were major events. I mean, I think the one in Missouri was, I believe, 48,000, 50,000 products, and they just actually released 14,000 products back into the system. Oof. I mean, it's massive, and especially in Missouri, it was a new market, so it impacted pretty much every operator in one factor or another. So now we've fast forward to actual true recall coverage, which I think is very good to get because it's first party, third party, BI, contamination, pollution, all these different things out there in the true recall product that, it's affordable, but with all these other spends, I understand why people don't take it up. But I do truly believe that with these incidents that are happening, there's going to be, there's more education about it. The recalls are happening, 50,000 products, that affects everybody in the market. And I think what people are realizing is what that expense is and what a quarantine actually looks like, and that, hey, if it happens as a one-off, it's not a big deal. But when you have maybe 5,000 of your products sitting in quarantine for 6 months, and when they went into quarantine, they were 6 months old. When they come out, you destroy them all because they're a year old. There's these little nuances to it, and the expense products don't speak to any of it. And fortunately, as always with cannabis, there's always a couple of new products that come out that, is available in other aspects of the standard market, ENS market, but isn't in cannabis. And a great example is a recall containment product that just came out of the marketplace that we're super excited about. That's very robust, first party, third party, has amazing bells and whistles. And that's just a good example of how the market is catching up, and that these other folks are coming in and saying, hey, how can we educate you cannabis people on these different products that we're selling to manufacturers all over the world? So it's interesting time to be in the space because there's a lot more capacity and not just capacity, but new products coming out. And that's very exciting.
If you're a retailer listening to the podcast today and you're working with a different wholesaler on your cannabis business, why should they work with Jencap?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There's a lot of good reasons. When we built this team up, we definitely noticed, what our competitors are doing in the space, how they had spread their teams, how they had, no real continuity. And by that, I mean, you would have somebody in one office working on property and then in another office working on the casualty lines, and they wouldn't be talking. And oftentimes the questions are very similar. Also, you'd have somebody working in one part of the country, say in Washington. I'll use my home state as Massachusetts. We are very tribal. We're very, very localized. We don't even like to work with brokers in New Hampshire, for example. So, having somebody coming from the West Coast, and if that's the only option, that's great. But to have regional expertise, somebody who knows the territory and just, knows your local ice cream shop sometimes can help. So, what we've done is we built a cross-functional team, cross-regional team that all collaborates. We work on deals based on where it makes the most sense for the insured, not based on what crossed my desk. We use that cross-functional team to leverage ourselves to have the best market access. We've also developed some very unique programs we're proud of. We've got some pollution products, hired non-owned auto. We kind of picked some of the harder lines where we were not finding the coverage in the marketplace to develop and incubate new products on. And really, it's about a collaborative effort. I've not seen folks really work together in such a way where they're sharing accounts, they're sharing every part of the deal. And I think that's what puts our best foot forward for our clients, is that you get absolute continuity and a one-stop shop. Nobody comes to Jencap and says, well, they're my favorite for PNC, but I go to this one for my comp or my cannabis professional. Oftentimes we hear that, they're a great one-stop shop, and that's what we're proud to do.
Your 2024 tagline, efficient insurance.
That's right. You heard.
Which is really, yeah. I mean, it's also really Jencap's tagline as well. That's just the power of the platform. Period.
And it's where we really need to go in the future. The day of the generalist is gone, and we really need to sharpen up and know your space and partner with the best.
Yep. Whether you're a 2-person mom and pop shop or you're one of the top 10 largest MSOs in the country, Jencap's cannabis division is ripe and ready to set you up for success.
No, that's a very good point. I mean, my team does not put our nose up based on the size of account. We will work with anybody, whether it's a small mom and pop or the MSO, because at the end of the day, they all need our help, and they're very important to us. And we learn and we support them all in different ways for the industry. It's important to us.
Well, I wish that we weren't out of time today, but we are. We could talk about so many different angles of the cannabis industry. But Erich, thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for tuning in to Flip the Cap, the insurance industry's premier podcast, where insurance insights flow and trending topics are always on tap. We'll see you next time.